everybody. It's Leslie again. If you were here last time, then you've met me. If you're here for the first time in one of our Living with Nature series, welcome. We're super excited that you all are with us today. And once again, I'm Leslie, so I'm going to be one of your co-hosts. That you also meet Steve and Natalie a little bit later. And a couple of quick things before we get straight into our stuff. You were muted when you came into the classroom today, so you should be muted by default, but that does not mean you can't interact with us. We do have a chat going on. Now, if you were with us last time, it's a little bit different this time. What we did is we made it so it goes to one specific person, and that's Linda, so everybody say hi to Linda. And she is going to send those questions to the appropriate field coordinator, and we'll be able to answer them live on the video. Now, remember, we actually do have a ton of people with us today, which we're really excited about. We probably won't be able to answer every single question. So if we aren't able to answer it, make sure you go to our website in the next couple of days and you'll get the answers to those questions. And then there'll also be some other information on there as well. We have our polls again. So when those polls come up, you'll be able to ask the class and see what's going on and then answer it. And then we will answer them a little bit later in our chat with our experts. We also have a bingo card for you guys today. So if you were able to get the bingo card and you have that in front of you, make sure you're listening and watching so that you get those answers. And maybe you'll win bingo, win real big. We also have emojis, and so you can give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Go ahead, and if something is a little confusing or you don't know what's going on, if you could give us a thumb down and then let us know what's going on, and we'll try to help figure it out as much as possible. So I am going to level with you guys. I was told to meet somebody on zoo property, and I feel like I might have taken a wrong turn somewhere, because I feel like I ended up in like Land of the Hobbits, which is awesome and beautiful, but I just don't really feel like I'm on zoo property. So I'm hopefully going to be able to find the person that I'm looking for. But until then, this area, we are outside, and this area is a great place for lots of animals, including turtles, which I don't know if you guys like turtles, but I love turtles. And we do have I brought some biofacts with me to talk to you guys. And one of the biofacts that we have is a box turtle. We do have box turtle animal ambassadors, but at the zoo, we make sure that there is a certain temperature outside when the animals come out. And our box turtles aren't really used to the normal temperature that goes around this time of year. So it is actually too cold for most of our animal ambassadors to be out today, which is why we brought a lot of biofacts so you can still see some cool things. But eastern box turtles, we have 2 animal ambassador eastern box turtles, and they are named as such because I'm sure you can tell they look like a box. They are able to pull themselves all the way into their shell, and then they have this neat little hinge on the bottom that not all turtles have, and that allows them to pull on up. Now here, we think of turtles having this as their home and that this is what they hide in, but out in this area, they actually do dig and create little homes for them as well. So that's pretty much why we won't see any box turtles probably out today, because it's a little too cold for them. The shell is part of their body. And hold on one second. You can see right here, the backbone and the ribs of a turtle. This is a pond turtle called a yellow-bellied slider. But right here is that backbone, and then these are actually fused ribs that form around them. So they can pull a little bit into it, but they can't actually pull out of it. All the way. They can't come out of it, like TV likes to tell us. Now, I'm gonna go try to find my other person. Maybe I'll run into some other animals while I'm out here, but Steve, Natalie, can you guys take it over for a while? Because I really need to find out where I'm going.
Sure thing, Leslie, and good luck out there. Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Trinidad. I am a student at Asheville High School and actually attend some classes here at the zoo. Steve will catch up with us in a bit, but unlike Leslie, I'm actually at the zoo right now. I hope that you have visited us before. The zoo, there are a lot of zoo folks that work on a lot of regional conservation projects. Sometimes it's out there, out on the field, or sometimes it's here at the zoo, but it can be both as well. If we're doing something outside of the zoo, we like to bring it in here to your zoo experience. And sometimes what we're doing here in the zoo helps the wildlife counterparts. So I'm here with Dustin Smith. He is the zoo's curator for amphibians, reptiles, fish, and invertebrates. Am I missing any animals?
You got it, Ralph. Thank you very much. All the cool animals.
So where are we right now?
So we're in the Streamside building, and this is there's two buildings in Streamside Complex. And the southern building focuses on aquatic species, like what we have behind us, which is the hellbenders. Now, although this exhibit was designed to highlight hellbenders, we also wanted to highlight the mountain streams of North Carolina. There's a lot of diversity that people overlook, like all of the different species of fish, the shiners and the darters and the chubs, things like that. But in addition, we also have a screen that kind of has looping video talking about hellbenders, showing hellbenders' behaviors, and it also has some information about some of the research work that we do. And in addition, we've got a touch screen that we're working on adding a hellbender game to eventually. And lastly, again, our goal really is to highlight hellbenders. So within the exhibit, you can hopefully see a couple hellbenders, although they do hide a lot. Lastly, it's the artwork. We have this really cool sculpture that was donated to us by Dale Weiler and Lodi Woods, and it's kind of an exact replication of what you would see in the wild, which is a hellbender sticking its head out of a rock to protect it.
Okay, so you have talked about hellbenders a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more about them? What kind of animal are they? The name sounds a little spooky. And have you made your guesses on the nicknames?
Yeah, so because of their unusual appearance, you know, if you look at these guys, they're kind of flat, they're really slimy, they are a type of salamander, and they have all these skin folds down their body, and they're made to be completely aquatic. I mean, they do come on land occasionally, but it's very, very rare. So because of their unique appearance, they have lots of weird names, whether it's devil dog, Allegheny alligator, or one of my favorites is snot otter because they're so slimy. When people encounter them, they don't know what to expect. So there's a lot of myths about them. But generally speaking, they're not going to hurt anybody. They're just like your normal salamander, except they're very, very big. They spend, like I said, most of their lives underwater. And they can get to be really big. They can get to be almost 3 feet long. But they're not the largest salamander that we have here in the U.S. They're actually one of the biggest, but we have a species called an amphibia that gets to be bigger, almost 4 feet long, actually. And those are also completely aquatic. But they do spend almost all their lives underneath rocks, hiding underneath the rocks, and they come out at nighttime because they are nocturnal. They have that coloration to kind of help blend in with the rocks. And if you look really, really closely, you'll see a lot of skin folds. And those skin folds help to give them more surface area to help them absorb oxygen underwater. They need rivers that have a lot of oxygen in them, and so that's one of their adaptations to living in those rivers, those streams, and that habitat they prefer. That's kind of the microhabitat they prefer, is living underneath rocks within very, very clean, well-oxygenated streams.
Going back on the nicknames, have you heard the Carolina River Beetle?
I have not heard of that before. That's not one that I've heard of. No, there are a lot, but not that one.
So I wish I had a yardstick here to show you guys how long. Today's our lucky day. There's actually one here. So these salamanders can grow to be about 2 feet long, which is right here, but they'll max out probably about 29 inches. That's a really, really big salamander right there. So like we talked about it a little bit, they're aquatic. So how can you list out those adaptations again to help them live in those mountain streams?
Yeah. So again, like I said before, they have one of the most unique adaptations people will see that is just their general overall their bodies. I mean, they've got flat bodies to wedge underneath rocks, but they have all those skin folds. And again, back to the skin folds basically just give them extra surface area. And so the more surface area you have, the more oxygen you can absorb as a salamander, as an amphibian. And so they use those to help them stay underwater for long periods of time, but the river itself has to be well oxygenated. So usually when you find them, it's rivers that are moving fast, they're cool, and they're usually crystal clear. They're really, really nice, pristine rivers. But one other adaptation they have that's kind of unique is that tail. If you look at that tail, it's kind of flat and rudder-like, and that helps them swim in the water, whether they need to go upstream or downstream. It's really important for them to have that in those rivers that are faster moving.
So is there a name for those specific areas that they have to live in?
Yeah, that's kind of goes back to what I was talking about before, the specific, unique, small habitat they prefer, and it's called a microhabitat. So although generally speaking, they need those fast-moving rivers that have lots of oxygen and are clean and clear, but more importantly, if if you look at the smaller aspect, they need to be able to have flat rocks that they can live under. And when they're living underneath those rocks, that's where they're not only going to seek shelter, but that's also where they reproduce. They'll create little dens underneath the rocks. And those little dens are where they'll lay eggs, and they'll protect those eggs until they hatch out into little tiny hellbender larvae.
So these are long salamanders that have to live in special microhabitats. But why is the zoo interested in them? Like, are they in danger or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. They are actually protected throughout their whole entire range. So although North Carolina has the largest population of hellbenders anywhere in their range, they actually go from range from New York all the way south to Georgia. And throughout their entire range, their populations are declining. They're disappearing. And there's a lot of different reasons, but the primary reason is habitat loss, habitat degradation, and siltation. And siltation is what happens when things like roads or farms are near rivers, and every time it rains or anytime there's any kind of water seepage, any kind of water movement, everything in the area gets diverted to those rivers. So the rivers are kind of the catch-all, they're the catch basin. And when that happens, all that silt builds up in the rivers and it fills in a lot of the rocks. And so because of that, we've taken a couple of approaches to doing surveys as well as these hellbender nest boxes that we have. And so if you look at these hellbender nest boxes that we have, and we actually have one right here inside of our exhibit, it's a pretty cool project that we're working on. And the hellbender nest boxes are designed to allow the hellbenders to live in the boxes. It's a great place for them to seek shelter, but also they can reproduce. And they're designed in a way by engineers from the University of Missouri to withstand our fast-moving rivers in North Carolina. But also, they're also designed to help with the silt issue. So the goal is put these boxes in rivers so the hellbenders can recover, and the silt should not fill the boxes. So we have about 40 of these boxes right now in Western North Carolina, so that the hellbenders will eventually use them. And this will help bolster or grow their populations, but it will also help just give them extra habitat.
So what are the different parts of this nest box? And like, how do they get in and stuff like that?
Very good question. So this is kind of a cross section. So usually it's one solid box. The point here is what would be facing upstream. So the water would kind of go around the box, because again, it's designed hydrodynamically to allow the water to flow around it. On top, there's a PVC port, and it's getting kind of covered in algae, which is what we want, because that way it blends in and it looks more natural. But that port, we have the ability to open up so we can see if there's a hellbender inside, or maybe even some hellbender eggs, just depends on the time of year. And then lastly, there is an opening at this end, which would be facing downstream, and that's where the hellbenders would enter and exit the box, as well as that's where they would stick their heads out and kind of protect the box, or even seek mates, things like that, which is exactly what you would see from them sitting underneath a normal den rock like this one in this sculpture right here.
Okay, so the habitats which these salamanders live in could sometimes get filled up with dirt or just debris in general. So these nest boxes are designed to help them, to prevent that from happening, so they have a place to lay their eggs and to live. Okay, so what do they eat? Like, what are the differences from out in the wild and here at the zoo?
Yeah, so we try to replicate the diet in the wild as best we can at the zoo. For the most part, these guys are gonna eat just about anything that's living in the river that'll fit in their mouth. They're kind of opportunistic, but they really like crayfish as well as lots of other aquatic invertebrates, and they also like fish. So I'm sure every once in a while some of these shiners might get eaten by the hellbenders, but for the most part, we feed them a pretty good diet of chopped up fish, and we feed them a couple times a week. So these guys are doing pretty well. They're pretty well taken care of.
Does the zoo plan on breeding them at all in the future?
That's a really good question. If they were to breed in the exhibit, which is not really likely, we wouldn't discourage it. But typically, these guys need larger social structures for breeding. And there's only one zoo that's actually ever bred hellbenders, and that's the St. Louis Zoo. So in the future, we may want to consider it, but we're not right now.
Well, thank you so much, Dustin, for all your information on the salamanders and the conservation efforts that the zoo is making. We're going to see if Leslie ever found her guest and her turtle friend. I wonder if there's any salamanders out where Leslie is right now.
Hey guys, so We didn't find any adult salamanders left, at least no real ones. We do have some fake ones hanging out here, including our fake hellbender over here. But you guys got to see the real thing, so. But I did find Nell. This is who I was looking for the whole entire time. So Nell is our Associate Curator of Regional Conservation, which I was so worried I didn't know where I was that I totally forgot to say why we were here today and why we're talking about what we were talking about in our Living with Nature series. So we're all talking about regional conservation today, and we have our Associate Curator of Regional Conservation. So that's basically what the zoo is doing to help protect lands and animal, basically wild places and wild animals, which kind of brings us back to here. Where are we now?
Well, we are at Ridges Mountain, which is about 12 miles from the zoo. We're west of the zoo in the Uwharrie Mountains, and we have these beautiful rocks covered with lichens and some animals that it's very rare to have around here. Oh, we're looking at all the beautiful rocks and lichens and mosses.
Oh, so while we're looking at them, can I tell you my nerdy joke?
Oh, sure. What's your
Okay.
nerdy joke?
You guys could all laugh at me. It's totally fine, but I love nerdy things. So I heard that what makes lichen is when when algae and fungi take a liking to each other, and they become lichen.
Okay.
Everybody cue laugh and.
And
but yeah, these beautiful rocks.
Buried and grown all over the rocks. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yes.
So do we have any kind of neat lichen or moss on these rocks?
We have so many kinds of lichen and moss that I don't even know what they all are.
They are beautiful though.
And we also have some rare plants on this site.
Okay.
And these upland pools, which are very rare. So the zoo purchased this site to protect all these different features, even the rocks, which are gorgeous, so that people can come and enjoy them. We have researchers come and try to find new animals here. And so this is an important site to have to preserve so that everybody can enjoy it.
So that kind of goes into well, first and foremost, does the zoo have other kind of places that we protect as well?
It does. It has about 1,000 acres of land right behind the part that everybody thinks of as the zoo.
Okay.
That is used by wild animals and has hiking trails, and sometimes camps go up there. So we have that. We have Ridges Mountain Piedmont Longleaf Pine Nature Preserve, which has a very unusual community of plants, which leads to an unusual community of animals. Like used to have red cockaded woodpeckers, which are endangered, and we hope to bring them back.
Very cool. How much? Here's our $1 million question. So how much land does the zoo own and manage outside of where the actual animals are?
Outside of the zoo itself, we have 1,800 acres that are managed for wildlife and wild plants and for people to go out and enjoy them.
Why is it so important that we protect all different types of animals and plants and stuff like that?
So I think you may have mentioned biodiversity.
I didn't
earlier.
yet.
And biodiversity, as you bio, of course, is life, and diversity is many different kinds. So we're talking about the many different kinds of life. So if we look around here, we have many different kinds of life here. If you look at a parking lot, if you look closely, there'll probably be some little things growing in the cracks, but not like we've got here.
And okay, yeah.
So to have all the pieces that make up nature helps keep the whole planet healthy.
Okay, so yeah, biodiversity is very important for the health of our planet, basically. So that is why we want to protect these regional lands. For sure, that totally makes sense. Well, what kind of animals do we have around here that we've done research about? I know I see this over here.
Oh yes, the brown-headed nuthatch fox. Well, the brown-headed nuthatch, as you can tell, is quite a tiny bird, and it's a bird that lives in cavities. And And these days, since so many trees get cut down before they're old enough to become hollow, there aren't any places for brown-headed nuthatches to live.
Which I believe Linda has a picture of. They're very, very small,
They're
cute little birds.
Cute little birds that make a noise like a squeaky toy.
Very cool. Now, what is this behind us?
Now this is an upland depression swamp forest is the fancy name for it, or you can call it an upland ephemeral pool. And ephemeral means it comes and then it goes again. And these pools fill with rainwater in the winter. They have a rock bottom, and the water will stand until it dries up in the spring. And these pools are very special to amphibians because since they're dry all summer, you come here in the summer, it's just going to look like a little grassy valley. Since they're dry all summer, there are no fish in them. And fish just love to gobble up amphibian larvae. And so it's a wonderful place for little critters that have no defense against fish. And here are some marbled salamander larvae that are almost ready to crawl out on land. You can see they've got their big feathery gills, but they have their front and hind feet, and they're pretty good sized for a salamander larvae, and are just about ready to start their next stage of life under damp leaves. And
Yeah, I noticed those really cool big gills that are on top of them. Is that because they breathe water, or that, what is that for?
that is for getting their oxygen from water. And then once those gills are reabsorbed into their bodies and they're ready, they'll come out on land. So they're only using the gills while they're babies, and the adults will not have gills.
Okay, very neat. So we saw the they saw the adult hellbender basically.
Yeah,
So it does a baby hellbender would kind of look like this, but much larger. I would
well,
assume.
not that much larger. They're about, the first year, they're about the size of these guys.
Okay,
But
very
they
neat.
do have gills. And I also have what these fellows are eating. Yes, you can hold that. And that is little tiny crustaceans, like, here, you want my hand?
I was gonna say, what's easier? There, yeah, that's probably the
There they
best.
are. These are called fairy shrimp, and they grow in these ephemeral pools. The eggs stay in the moist dirt at the bottom all the time. And when the water comes in the winter, they hatch and grow up and feed salamanders and frogs and other critters in the pool. You almost can't put a dip net in without coming up with a bunch of fairy shrimp. They live on the rotted leaves and stuff on the bottom. And these are part of the food web of the ephemeral pools, where we have, it just is here part of the time, but it has a whole bunch of diversity during the time that the pool is in existence.
Is that one thing that makes this place such an important place? Is this ephemeral
Absolutely.
pond or pool?
There are several, there are about 4 of them here. And because they're so shallow, they're super easy to fill in. A bulldozer could just come across here, fill it in, put a house on the top. There used to be ephemeral pools all over North Carolina, and there's relatively few left that have all these special critters. And so we're preserving some to keep them around. It really is.
Totally, yeah, totally makes sense. So
Yeah.
we are able to keep this area so that it doesn't get bulldozed, doesn't get filled in and made a house made here, so we can help with that biodiversity, keeping our ecosystems and our food webs as healthy as possible.
Absolutely.
Do we have any questions?
We do.
Okay.
What's the point of lichen and moss?
Oh, that's a great question. We got, what is the point of lichen and moss that's on these rocks?
Well, the lichen and moss has been working on these rocks for probably millions of years, and every bit of soil that is between these rocks with the trees and the grapevines and everything growing here, the lichen was what chipped these rocks down into soil. So we need those to get some dirt to grow stuff in. And in addition, lichens can be an indication of air quality, because there's so many different lichens here, we know that the air is very clean. If you look at the same
Huh.
kind of rocks over by Raleigh, there might be just 1 or 2 kinds of lichen instead of 30 or 40.
Very cool. It's making soil for us. Do we have another question?
Is that a real hawk?
Is that a real hawk? So, like we were saying earlier, we were hoping to bring some other animal ambassadors out for you guys today, but it was a really bumpy ride to get here with all of this the rain that we've been having, and it's very cold for some of our animals. So this is Braveheart, who is our red-tailed hawk, and it is his stunt double. So Braveheart's stunt double works very, very hard to look like a hawk and to act like a hawk. And you can see he's doing a very good job of it. So we are very thankful to have Franklin's stunt double and Braveheart's stunt double, and then all these other stunt doubles with us as well, to make sure that our animals are nice and safe in their habitats inside. So did we have any other questions? All right, well, I think we are going to send it back on over to Steve and Natalie. And I have a quick question. We've been talking a lot about salamanders today. And so a quick question for you guys over there. Why are amphibians important? Could you ask Dustin maybe to see if we could get an answer to that?
Hey guys, absolutely. It's Steve again. Welcome to all you guys. It's good to see you guys again hanging out here. Our living nature is learning. I'm with Dustin. You guys met, I already know Natalie. But to kind of come back to what Leslie was asking, Dustin, we're at this cool place, but they're all talking about salamanders. What makes an amphibian an amphibian?
There's lots of different characters. The one most people think of is based on their name, and that's they spend part of their life in the water. There's some sort of component. Now, for the most part, that's true. You know, most amphibians, well, I should say all amphibians have kind of that unique skin that's really, really almost looks slimy, but it's usually really shiny. And their skin is really important because they breathe through their skin. So that's one component that pretty much all amphibians have. There's always exceptions to the rule, but that's one they do have. And there's 3 different groupings. So there's frogs and toads, there's salamanders, and there's a group called caecilians. And we don't have caecilians here, so we're not going to touch on those. But of those other groups, we have lots and lots of frogs and toads and salamanders here in North Carolina.
Very cool. So, you know, as Leslie was mentioning things, they're kind of important. But why are they important? What do those adaptations make them important? Why should we care about these guys at all?
Actually, it's a really good question. It's really relevant right now because so many amphibians around the world are declining, and people ask that question all the time. Why should I care? I've got lots of frogs on my house or in my yard. Well, they are very, very important because they're indicator species. So they let us know what's going on in the environment. So if you look at a species of frog that you would see in your yard that breeds every single spring, they're relying on clean water in the area. So if they don't have that clean water, then they're not going to survive. The reason that's important to us is because that's letting us know about how our water is doing. So if there are rivers, streams, ponds nearby, and they are in such poor shape that amphibians cannot even live in them, then that should let us know whether or not we really want to be drinking that water.
Cool.
But they're also really important because they act as pest control in our environment. You know, they're the ones out there eating all those bugs that we generally don't like. And then they're also, you know, just like every other animal, they play the role of predator and prey. You know, they're again controlling the insects as predators, but they're also important in the role that they do play as prey. So every species has its own unique need for being on the planet, and theirs are you know, many reasons.
Yeah, a lot of those fold into what our needs. I never thought of them being both predator and prey. You don't think of it that way very often. It's usually one or the other. You have a lion, you have an antelope. Yeah, but I didn't think about frogs and toads, salamanders eating other things. And being eaten.
And at all stages of life, you know, when they're like the salamander larvae they just saw at a Ridges Mountain, those guys are eating other salamander larvae, but they're also eating tadpoles and aquatic invertebrates. Whereas once they're adults, that completely changes.
That's interesting. So I've heard you've talked about them before a lot. North Carolina is a special place. Why?
Yeah, North Carolina is home to more species of salamanders than anywhere else in the world. So think about that. As big as our world is and as diverse as the world is, we have more salamanders, both density and diversity, most number of species in one area than anywhere else in the entire world. It's pretty impressive, more than 60 species of salamanders.
Yeah, I know people go out salamandering a lot, and that's what they find, right? They're out looking, flipping over the rocks. And I bet some of you guys have done that before too. Flipping over the rocks, finding animals, leaving them there. because that's home.
Yeah.
But you're out checking things out, right? So it's really exciting.
Same thing.
knowing
It
that.
goes back to that microhabitat we said. You know, they love
Oh, there
those
you go.
logs because not only those logs provide protection, but they also provide places where some of those salamanders are actually laying their eggs and the eggs are hatching. Because there are some salamanders that don't need to go into the water, and then that's also a great place for food. You know, every time you flip one of those, you see those little isopods, the roly-polies and the worms. That's what they're eating. They love that.
That's cool. That's good stuff. So those amphibians are really important. They're living in that habitat, living in that environment, and all that's impacting them.
Yeah.
Really important to know. Excellent stuff. But we've come here.
Yeah.
And this is at the zoo. Natalie told you we're now at the zoo. But this isn't what I'm used to as the zoo.
Yeah.
Where are we?
Yeah, actually,
this?
a lot of the work that we do at the zoo, people don't ever get to see, unfortunately, unless we're doing something like this. And this area is an area where we raise tadpoles. This whole setup is a setup that we have specifically designed to raise tadpoles that we're hatching out of eggs, raising the tadpoles, and we're going to release them into the wild. It's a process that we do with a few species of amphibians in North Carolina that are endangered.
So the zoo is breeding.
No, actually, we're not. And if you look at these tubs, every one of these tubs is full of water. There's no frogs or toads at all. These are actually tubs that we use for what's called head starting. And what we're doing is we go out every single year. Actually, this time of year, this weather's perfect. And ironically enough, it's not perfect for me, but it's perfect for these guys. These guys are winter breeding species. And ironically enough, they just bred this week. So we are in the process of adding more eggs and tadpoles, and we'll show you guys just eggs in just a minute. But in every one of these tubs, we have a handful of tadpoles that we're raising up. And once these guys turn from tadpoles into little tiny frogs, we go back and we release them back into the wild. And we repeat this step every year to help the species recover.
Interesting. You don't even have a coat on. You have a jacket on.
I know.
Think about those salamanders, those amphibians are out there. And this is when they're out moving around. They're out breeding, doing that, and just dealing with this North Carolina winter. It's kind of interesting to think that this is okay for them. And it's chilly today.
Yeah, and most people think of amphibians are one of those species that you hear calling every spring, right?
Yeah.
You know it's springtime when the spring peepers are calling. Everybody recognizes that. But there are some winter breeding species. We have a handful of them in North Carolina, like the gopher frog that we're working with here. And it gets so cold that these tubs will partially freeze over, and the tadpoles have adaptations to survive that. You know, they're because they're a winter breeding species. They only come out on certain nights of the year during the winter when there's just enough rain, and that's when they come out and breed. Otherwise, you don't see them for pretty much the rest of the year.
That's awesome. So we're breeding we are head starting the Carolina gopher frog.
Correct.
Why did we pick the Carolina gopher frog?
So Carolina gopher frogs populations have declined drastically throughout the state of North Carolina. They're only found in a few small pockets of the state, and historically their populations were probably exceeding 30 total populations in the state of North Carolina, and now we're only down to about 6 or 7, and that's because of habitat loss and habitat degradation. And I know I keep saying that, but they have a unique habitat. So their habitat is specifically within longleaf pine habitats, and they also use ephemeral wetlands, kind of like you guys just saw the ones at Ridges, but these are a little bit different. These ephemeral wetlands occur with no canopy, whereas the ones that we saw at Ridges were generally surrounded by hardwoods. These guys are pretty much in wide open ephemeral ponds or ephemeral wetlands. They come down, they reproduce in those ponds every year. The problem is a lot of those ponds are disappearing, and a lot of the longleaf pine habitat has disappeared. So because of that, Carolina gopher frogs are an endangered species in North Carolina. And so as one of our conservation measures, we've decided to work with North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission to help their recovery.
Oh, partnership.
Yeah, it's a great partnership that we have with them.
Nice. So let me get this straight. Make sure everybody kind of knows. We're head starting animals. So we're going out and collecting small parts of egg masses, bringing them back here. Head start, what a great term, right? Head starting, giving them a chance. So raise them up through tadpoles into froglets.
Yep.
I think it's an awesome word too.
Yeah, it's a great word.
So you go from you're head starting to get to froglets. And when they become froglets, then what do you guys do?
Then we release them back in the wild.
Okay.
So what we do is typically we go out, again, this time of year, we work with Wildlife Resources Commission. We collect a portion of an egg mass, just a few eggs out of every single mass that we encounter. And then we bring them back here, we hatch them out. Usually takes a couple weeks depending on the temperature, because when it's colder, the development goes really, really slow. Once they hatch out, they are put in these tubs. These tubs are set up in a way that they pretty much have everything they need within the tubs. Now, this particular tub that I'm opening is what they look like before we set them up. So this is a first stage tub. There's nothing in there except for water. that is because I have some eggs that I'm going to show you guys in a minute. And the eggs, once they hatch out, they'll go in here. But before they go in here, we're going to add some substrate. And this is what they look like when they have the substrate inside. So once the eggs hatch out, again, they turn into tadpoles, and you can actually see some tadpoles swimming around in there right now if you look really, really closely. And then they're going to stay in here until they morph out, which they usually morph out around June or July, depending on when the eggs were laid. And once they're ready to morph out, we put little tiny crayfish traps in here or minnow traps in here. So the frogs come to the surface looking for a place to leave the water like they would usually do at the bank of the pond. And once they do that, they go into the traps, we pull them out, and then we release them back into the wild.
Hey, do me a favor. Give Greensboro Science Center a shout out for getting bingo.
Oh, good job, Greensboro Science Center.
Thanks,
Glad to
Greensboro
hear,
Science Center. That's awesome.
Glad to
Nice
hear
job.
somebody got all the answers correct.
That's cool. Glad we did okay with you guys.
So some of my friends are involved in something called Frog Watch. What's that program like? And do you have to have a lot of prior knowledge to be a part of that?
No, actually, Frog Watch is a really great program. It's a citizen science program. And citizen science programs are great because they allow anybody at all, whether you know anything about animals or not, to participate in science. And so the way Frog Watch works is you actually learn how to identify all the frogs in your area based on their call, because every species of frog and toad has a unique call. So if you're able to learn all these calls, then you're able to actually just pick a spot in your yard or in your neighborhood or a nearby wetland and go out and listen for frogs. And once you hear them, you just quickly jot down some really, really basic data. And it helps scientists all around the United States know what species are in your area when they start calling. And those are really, really important for us, especially as seasons kind of vary each year.
Cool. Hey, Tiffany, can you follow us over? You said you had an egg mass.
Yeah, I
over
wanted to
there
show you guys
share.
one of our egg masses from our gopher frogs. And again, like I told you guys before, this was actually a mass that was just collected a couple days ago because this species, again, is breeding in the winter. So if you want to look right here at the egg mass, this is actually how we usually set them up until they hatch out. I'm going to move it just a little tiny bit so it's over the white background. But if you look closely, you can actually see the eggs developing. Typically, when they're first laid, each of those little, the black things that you're looking at right now are embryo that are developing. When they are first laid, they're little tiny black dots. And then as they develop, they'll probably take another week or so, and then they'll hatch out as little tiny tadpoles. And then we'll move them outside into the larger tubs that you guys saw earlier.
And that's about the same size, about the size of part of a mass you'll bring back?
Yep. Their masses might have over 100 eggs at a time.
Oh, wow.
But we only bring back maybe between 15 and 20, depending on the size of the mass. We don't want to take too many from each mass.
Yeah, that makes sense. You guys were talking about that Frog Watch second. I have this. It's an amazing tool, and if I can share that with you guys, some of you may have seen this before. It's called an identifier, and it's such a neat thing. Because check this out. Let's pick something you guys are probably familiar with. So Frog Watch is all about frog calls. Watch this. Listen. So it helps you learn about the animals. I bet you know what that is. I know some of you do. I know for a fact a couple of you do. Now that I know Greensboro Science Center's tuned in. That's your spring peeper. How about this one? Yeah, it's a bullfrog, but it's a really cool tool. It's called an identifier. It has bird song as well. So it's really a neat tool to be able to use to help you learn the frog calls and bird calls if you're into that. But if you're going to get into Frog Watch, it might be something you might want to look into as a tool to help you learn some of those. So this is really cool, being able to go to the wild, bring parts of that back here, help them out a little bit. What's the word? Head starting, right? Yeah. So bring it to head starting, get them up to froglet, another awesome term, and release them back in the wild. That's great. Great job. Thank you so much for taking care of it.
We can do it.
That's really awesome.
So we're gonna head back to Leslie. Dustin has talked a little bit about Frog Watch. Is there anything that the zoo is doing on their private property to help in this at all, Leslie?
Thanks, Natalie. Yeah, so we have a couple of really cool things that we do to help find out who is in kind of our regional lands. And one of the biggest things that we have to do is be able to ID animals, basically. So real quick, if you want to look down here, Cynthia, I have 4 snake models. And these are 4 different snakes that you can find in an area just like this. And one of the things that we want to do is be able to tell things right away. So one of these animals is a venomous snake, and the other 4 are not, but they are snakes that are commonly mistaken as a venomous snake. All right, so think if you can figure out which of these 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Which one you think is a venomous snake? Give you a little bit of time. If you guessed number 1, you are correct. That is a copperhead. And I actually know that based on the markings that it has on its body. It kind of looks like, from the top, it kind of looks like an hourglass. So it is smaller towards the back and wider as it goes down to the belly. And it actually goes all the way down to the belly as well. And from the side, they call it the Hershey kiss of death because it kind of looks like a Hershey's kiss. But the good thing is they're not super toxic. So as long as you get to the hospital, or you don't have like a really severe allergic reaction, you'll be fine. You'll be in a lot of pain and it'll hurt your wallet because it costs a lot of money. But they aren't a death sentence. Now the number 2 one is your black rat snake, or your eastern rat snake, excuse me. This one is your eastern king snake. And then this one's probably the one that commonly gets mistaken for cottonmouths or water moccasins. This is just a water snake, basically. But I want to talk a little bit. Having those ID skills are very important when you're trying to figure out who is in your area. And you can use other citizen science programs like iNaturalist. And Nell's going to tell us in just 1 second how we are able to find stuff here on Ridges Mountain. But this snake specifically is an eastern king snake. And most people have a little bit of a they get a little nervous around snakes, but I can usually get everybody to love this type because they can actually eat venomous snakes. So this guy can eat copperhead. So you definitely want to have it in your area if you're really nervous about venomous snakes. But if you just stay away from snakes, they'll stay away from you. They're more scared of you. You're much taller than they are. But a lot of the other animals that we can find around here come out at night. And it's really important for us to be able to get a large view of the animals that are in a specific area so that we know kind of that food web and what we have and how we can protect them. And one of the ways so we can go to sleep at night, because I don't know about you guys, but I enjoy sleeping. And we don't have to be here 24/7, is by camera trapping. So Nell is going to demonstrate for you about how we would put together a camera trap.
So this is one of our camera traps here. And you can see on the outside, here's the camera lens, just like in a camera, but it also includes a motion sensor. And up here is an array of infrared lights that goes off at night when the motion sensor triggers, so that we essentially have an invisible flash for the camera. And then it's all in a waterproof housing to protect it. So inside the camera, we've got, this is a regular little a little SD card that stores the pictures. There's a mechanism in here and lots of batteries, because this can be out here for several months at a time. So what we would do is turn the on switch and set the camera, and then mount it usually to a tree is a good place to do it. We usually set it low so that it can be triggered by little small stuff walking along the ground, as well as the bigger things like deer. And this will work 24 hours. We get a lot of animals at night, but we get a lot in the day too. The ones that they hear us coming, yakking and rustling and everything, and they just drift away. We don't even know they were there. But we do have some pictures of some of the animals that we have found on zoo lands with our camera traps.
Yeah, we're gonna have you guys do a little work, see if you can help us ID some animals on our camera traps. So like we were saying too, we actually have something at the zoo called Candid Critters. that
Not at the
Oh,
zoo,
sorry.
but here in North Carolina.
here in North Carolina, sorry,
Yeah.
here in North Carolina called Candid Critters, and you can help ID the animals that are here during the day or at night. Now, I picked mostly night animals because those are the ones we don't see as much, and sometimes it can be a little bit harder. But there is a light on there. There's an infrared light, or that they're able to get a good picture of it without actually emitting that light, so
Right,
the animal
so it
can
doesn't
see it.
scare them.
So yeah, it definitely doesn't scare them, because you'll see in the first picture. So if Linda, if you can put up the first picture, you'll see that animal staring right at you. So see if you can figure out together, or have a little war going on to see who thinks what it is. I'm gonna give you a little bit of time to figure it out, but I'm also gonna give you some hints. So first and foremost, I know when I see that picture, I think wolf immediately. But we actually only had red wolves in North Carolina, and they live all the way over at the coast, and they are critically endangered. So chances are, if you saw that and you were in Alligator River Reserve, it's not a red wolf. It is, in fact, a coyote, and he's looking straight at you. So if you got coyote, congratulations. Let's go to our next one, Linda. So the next one should be up, and this one's a little bit harder. Oh, now it's up. This one might be a little bit harder to see because you can only kind of see the back end of the animal. But that is also one of the most iconic parts of that animal as well. So if you take a look all the way back at that tail, you might be able to figure out what that is. Did you say beaver? Because if you did, you're right. Congratulations, that is a beaver. So we can also not see the whole entire animal and be able to use those iconic characteristics of those animals to figure out what it is, or maybe time of year and stuff like that. So Linda, if you can throw up our next one. This one in particular looks a little bit different than some that you might see because it has an all white back. Normally there is a stripe down the middle for this animal, but you know, just like people have all different shapes and sizes and colors, and dogs have all different markings. Thank you. Now she's got me. So this one can have a little bit different too. So if you got it, this is your nice smelly friend, the striped skunk. All right, Linda, if you could put up that next one. Okay, so this is my favorite animal that is around, and a lot of people don't like it, but they're amazing because they eat lots of ticks. So we know that people have been getting lots of diseases from ticks, so having these animals around is really important. They're very harmless. They do have lots of teeth, so when they open their mouths, they kind of look scary. But if you look at the size and you see that tail back there, then you'll know that that is an opossum. So it has an O in front of it, so opossum. There are actually possums in the world, but they don't live in North America. So that is our opossum, Virginia opossum. All right, Linda, if you can do the next one. We have 2 left, friends. We're almost there. Now, I really liked this picture because it's very up close and personal. Like Nell was saying, the animals do know that the camera is there, so they may get very close. And we also get lots of pictures of people too, looking at the camera. But if you could tell this one pretty quick, that is our eastern cottontail. And then the last one, Linda, this is also a really funny one because this is probably what you'll get a lot of times with certain animals, is just a nice big blur of an animal that's there. But if you can see kind of in the far corner, you can see that floofy tail, and that is just, you know, your gray squirrel. The North Carolina's state mammal, the gray squirrel right there. So good job, guys. Hopefully you got those. And we have tons more pictures of that we have to go through and we have to identify so that then we can know how to manage and take care of this land to keep that biodiversity up as well, and keep that food web intact, basically. So Nell, I have a quick question for you.
Okay.
In your time camera trapping around here, what has been your favorite thing that you saw?
The favorite thing that I saw was 2 bobcats.
Very cool.
I've only seen a live bobcat once in my life. So when I saw 2 of them on the camera trap traveling together, I was just very thrilled.
Very cool. I know we're very lucky. We get to see bobcats at the zoo every day with our bobcat that's on there. So they are very magnificent animals. I did when I was going through the pictures as well. I saw a family of raccoons basically. So wait, another question. In the camera traps that you put up, you usually are able to get a lot of animals. How did you know that that was a good place to put up that camera trap?
Well, we've tried several places. One of the best places, it turns out, is there's a perimeter fence around the zoo so that if an animal gets out of their enclosure, they won't go running into downtown Asheboro. And there's a place where there's a little creek that goes under the perimeter fence. So it's like a gate for the animals between near the zoo and outside of the zoo. And I put a camera trap there, and everybody goes through
Yeah,
there.
it's like a highway.
But you'll see like the bobcats go through, and then the raccoons don't come through until like half an hour.
So I did hear we got another bingo for Tensia. I'm so sorry if I butchered your name. I am horrible at reading. So, so congratulations. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really neat though that you were able to find kind of this highway that's through and able to get a lot of animals that are out there. So we are pretty much it's pretty much it for us here over at Ridges Mountain, which we're very excited to get back into the car because we are very cold and a little wet because it's wet around here. But I'm going to pass it back over to our friends Steve and Natalie to take it from there, guys.
Hey guys, sounds good. Thanks for kicking it back to us. And y'all be careful out there with all the rain we've had. I'm sure it's a little slick, so do be careful while you're out and about. And thanks to everybody out there for going out and making that happen for us. Leslie and Nell, especially, and all the folks behind the scenes. It's a neat little opportunity for us to be able to take you guys out to some of the property and spaces that the zoo owns and manages out that way. Hey, did you guys figure out the state critters? We asked that early. Did you figure out state critters? Pine Barrens tree frog and the box turtle. State frog. State reptile. I hope you guys got that. So today has been a really, really cool day, right? Yep. I heard you had a question?
Yeah, there was a question about the difference between turtles and tortoises.
That's a good question. It kind of depends where you are. So what we talk about here is we'll do the tortoises first. So when I think tortoise, I think one of my favorite animals is the desert tortoise or the Galapagos tortoise. Big, thick legs, a domed shell, and almost always an herbivore. Herbivore? A plant eater. So that's what the tortoises usually are. The turtles, when I think of those guys, I go right to snapping turtles or the sea turtles. So they've got more of a flattened shell, a lot of times almost a flipper-like leg because they're in the water, hanging out a lot of times in the water. And many of them are carnivores. Many of those guys are eating, like the sea turtles are eating a lot of jellyfish. Your snapping turtles are eating fish. So that's kind of how I've always talked about the difference. And that's here in the States. So the tortoise, those big domed shells, thick legs, usually on land and more herbivorous, more of a plant diet. Where the turtles, more of a streamlined shell, flipper-like legs for most of them, more carnivorous in the way they eat and a lot of times in the water. Don't ask me about the box turtle that has a domed shell. I don't know all the details on where that name came from. So yeah, great question. And thanks for shooting those questions out there. We truly appreciate it. So for today, really, really neat stuff. Talking about our regional conservation efforts done by the North Carolina Zoo. And it's neat to think that we're doing some things here. We're doing some things out there. We're bringing some of the things out there and here. And I like the ephemeral pond idea, that coming and going and all the action that happens in the pond while there's water there until the water goes away. But do you have a favorite today?
Definitely the salamanders, the efforts that the zoo is doing out in the mountains with the nest boxes, and bringing some of that into the exhibit so that the visitors at the zoo can see what's going on outside and they can take a look and interact with that habitat.
Yeah, that's really cool. That Hellbender stuff, it's just amazing to think that they're doing that. And all the partnerships that the zoo has, we're not trying to do it ourselves. There's some really amazing experts out there, so we're rolling those guys in. I like the head startings. I think it's neat to think that we're going out, collecting some of those egg masses, bringing them back here, putting them in these amazing mesocosms. What a great word that is. These tubs filled with water. It's a head start to give them a chance to survive. That's probably one of my favorite things that's out here. Before we wrap everything up, any other last questions we have to say? Shoot them out to us right quick if you get a chance. We don't want to kind of cut you guys off as well. We get so excited, so involved with what we're doing. So on our end, we have a lot of other thanks to Natalie, obviously. Tiffany was our PM person today. Wendy was helping us. Dustin, our expert, can't forget Dustin. Beth is over there making sure we're all staying on time and doing what we need to. So it's a really neat opportunity to share those kind of things with you guys to get stuff out there.
So thank you from behalf of our experts, from Steve, Leslie, for tuning in today. We hope that you really enjoyed our program with all the different stuff that we learned about. And we're also always looking for suggestions and feedback. So please let us know on how you're feeling about this series. The next Living in Nature program will be Tuesday, March 26th, and we will be learning about conservation projects internationally. So you'll want to come back and check in on what we're doing to help rhinos, gorillas, and so much more. But in the meantime, make sure that you're going out there and making a difference for the wildlife. Bye, guys.
Bye, y'all. Thanks for tuning in.
Carolina gopher frog is a threatened species in North Carolina due to habitat destruction across its range. It used to be known from 30 to 40 sites, and it's now reduced to only 6 current populations, one of which is in the Sandhills Game Lands where we are today. In this population, gopher frogs are only known from one pond, which presents challenges for the population. And because of this, we have undergone head starting, which is where we take eggs that are laid in the pond in the winter, and we raise them in mesocosms or cattle tanks and release them at the site.
There are 2 in this trap. This one right here has not started to develop his legs at all yet. So it's just a typical tadpole. And you can see that the tail and you know, just that typical tadpole shape. So I'm going to let him go. And then the other one I have in here has its front legs, back legs, but still has a full tail. Okay, and this gopher frog is just a couple of days away from being fully going through metamorphosis and being removed from the tub or the mesocosm here. You can see he has all 4 limbs, front limbs, back limbs, but he still has a significant amount of tail left, and he's going to have to absorb that before he is removed from the water. Since June 23rd, we've had over 200 metamorphs that we've released, and we're continuing to release back to where the eggs were collected from. Here's one that's actually a fully developed frog, fully metamorphed frog, and what we'll do next is we'll take him in and weigh him. Okay, now that we've removed the metamorphs from the mesocosm, it's time to get a weight on them. So we weigh each of them individually. This one's 4.7 grams, which is just slightly less than the weight of a nickel. Once we get the weight on him, we are going to transfer him to this group tub where he's going to stay until we're ready to mark them with the visible implant elastomer prior to their release. Now we're ready to mark the metamorph frogs. We do this by injecting a visible implant elastomer under their skin of their leg. We can use different color to indicate which population and year which the frogs were released.
Hey, today we're out on Sandhills Game Lands, It's a Wildlife Resources Commission managed property. We manage this property for both hunting and for natural resources, including Carolina gopher frogs, which are a threatened species in the state. Today we're going to be releasing metamorphs, which were grown up at the zoo in cattle tanks, and we're going to release them back into this pond where we first collected the eggs.